left Adar, I wanted to take a deeper look at the story of Esther, if we may. A deeper look at the story of Esther. Remember the former things, those of long ago. I am Elohim, and there's no other. I am Elohim, and there is none like me. We just sang Mika Mocha. There is none like him. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. Isaiah 46, 9 and 10. The book of Esther can be read on three levels: the historic, the allegoric, and the prophetic. And so I want to look at each one of these levels: the historic, the allegoric, and the prophetic. The first we'll look at is the historic. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, we know that these things happened that were recorded in the book of Esther. In Esther 1, we begin. This is what happened. That's the story. This is what happened. During the time of Ahasuerus, the Xerxes, who ruled over 127 provinces, stretching from India to Cush, or Ethiopia. At that time, the Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel, or capital, of Shushan. Esther 1, 1 and 2. That is historic. You can go back and you can check those facts out. And Ahasuerus did reign as the Xerxes over the Persian Empire. Ahasuerus' real name was Kayashayar, Shah, the son of Darius, the great Shah. The events took place 500 years before the time of Messiah Yeshua. The book of Esther is the story of a beautiful Jewish girl whose name was Hadassah, which means the myrtle, who became the queen of Persia, they knew as Esther. Esther's family had been deported from Judea to Babylonia in the time of the Judean king Jeconiah in 599 BCE. On the death of her parents, she was adopted by her father's brother Mordecai, who dwelt in Shushan with other Jewish refugees after Persia inherited them when they conquered Babylonia. Haman, the crown prince of the Amalekite royal family, direct descendant of King Agag, becomes the grand vizier of the Persian Empire. He is obsessed with revenge against the Jews and seeks their extermination. He convinces the king to allow him to execute the final solution to the Jewish question that will annihilate all the Jews in the empire from India to Cush. Queen Esther, after praying and fasting for 3 days and 3 nights, persuaded the king to execute Haman and grant Mordecai the king's signet ring and the right to save the Jews. Haman, in turn, is executed for duplicity against the queen, which is treason against the Persian Empire, and he's hanged. Haman's position of grand vizier is then given to Mordecai, and his estate is given to Queen Esther. The Jews struck down, and this is in Esther 9, beginning with the 5th verse, the Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them in the citadel of Shushan. The Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They also killed Parishandata, Dalphon, Aspada, Parada, Adelia, Eridata, Parmashata, Erisai, Eridai, and Visada, the 10 sons of Haman ibn Hamedata, the enemy of the Jews. Esther 9, 5 through 10. Historically, Mordecai was the son of Kish, which means he was the descendant of King Shaul in Esther 2 and 5. Haman was an Agagite, according to Esther 3:1, which means he was a descendant of King Agag the Amalekite. They could not have been more different. 500 years earlier, Yahweh punished King Shaul for not having executed Agag and the royal house of Amalek. The punishment seemed extreme: to kill all men, women, and children, the old and the young, and all cattle and all flocks, and destroy their land. That is extreme. But Yahweh knew what he was doing.
Amen.
It seems extreme until you read of Haman's plan of genocide. Then we understand that Yahweh was correct in telling King Shaul to execute Agag. Yahweh's punishments often appear harsh because we don't see the big picture. Yahweh's judgments are righteous even when we don't fully understand them.
Amen.
You are right in your verdict and justified when you judge, says Psalms 51 and 4. Israel is the nation, and I'm quoting Iraq in the Bible by Dr. David L. Brown. Israel is the nation most often mentioned in the Bible. But do you know which nation is second? It is Iraq. However, that's not the name that is used in the Bible. The names used in the Bible are Babylon, land of Shinar, and Mesopotamia. The word Mesopotamia means between two rivers. More exactly, between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. The name Iraq means country with deep roots. Indeed, Iraq is a country with deep roots and is a very significant country in the Bible. The first world empire was in Iraq, in Daniel 1 and 2, and Daniel 2, 36 through 38. The events of the book of Esther took place in Iraq. No other nation except Israel has more history and prophecy associated with it than Iraq. End of quote. So historically, we know the story of Esther. We know what happened, and we know the victory that Yahweh gave the remnant of Israel. But I want to look at the allegory, the types and the shadows in the scriptures, in the book of Esther. There is something called gematria, the study of the numbers, literally. Allegorically, we saw the importance of these numbers in the book of Esther. The prophetic author of Esther uses the numbers 4, 7, and 12. These are some of the numbers most used in end-time prophecy. The reason for this is because they have to do with time. 4 is the last week in the month. 7 is the last day of the week. Sabbath is the holiest day, the seventh day. 12 is the last month in the year. So if a prophet wants to speak of the last days, he uses these numbers. Allegorically, Haman is an image of the Moshiach Nagid, the Antichrist. This allegory shows us that the beast to come will not himself be Persian, but like Haman will attach himself to Mystery Babylon and rise to its highest ranks. However, the evil Haman can also represent the evil inclination in us that wants to exploit every situation for self-gain. He eventually wants to overthrow King Messiah from his sovereignty in our lives. Remember, Shaul says, the things that I want to do, I don't do. The things I don't want to do, I do. O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? But there is no condemnation, no guilt to those that have submerged themselves into Messiah, Yeshua. So if I walk in the Spirit, I don't offend the Torah. So that's what I've got to do, submerge myself into the Spirit of Yeshua. And then I can be victorious against my evil inclination.
Amen.
For if you live after the flesh, that's after the evil inclination, you shall surely die. But if through the Spirit do mortify, kill the deeds of the body, just like Mordecai had Haman killed, you shall live. Romans 8:13. Mordecai fulfills the role of the Melchizedek, the Zadokite priest. Like Yeshua, ever interceding for the saints. The scriptures say that the crucifixion was planned before the creation of the world in Revelations 13:8 and 1 Peter 1:20. Therefore, all the events of the Torah and the prophets, to include the book of Esther, were orchestrated by Yahweh in expectation of our deliverance. We see that in Luke 24:26-27, in Acts 2:30-31, and 1 Peter 1:10-11. Think about that. You are so special before your ever creation, when you were still a gleam in our Heavenly Father's eye. He already preordained your deliverance.
Amen.
The apostles referred to the public place of hanging in Hebrew as etz, which means tree. In the book of Esther, the word etz appears in 7 passages as the place for execution. In Esther 2:23, in Esther 5:14, in Esther 6:4, in Esther 7:9, in Esther 8:7, in Esther 9:13, and in Esther 9:25. And all of them are translated as gallows. The hanging tree. That's where our deliverance came from. Yeshua didn't hang on a cross. He hung on a tree. A crossbeam was added to that old almond tree overlooking the city of Jerusalem. How important our deliverance was and is to come.
Amen.
In the story of Esther, the righteous hero is almost hanged on the gallows. And then the same wooden structure suddenly transformed the situation from defeat to victory. Mordecai almost hung and then miraculously saved. Now King Messiah Yeshua is hung and we are miraculously saved. Mordecai is then appointed to the second place in the kingdom, with his throne above all other thrones except for the Kayashar. And once Yeshua makes atonement for our sins, he sits at the right hand of majesty, second only to the Heavenly Father. Now, we see the types and shadows. We see the historic. Now I want to look at the prophetic. How does Esther view as a prophetic book? What's a prophet? Abraham Herschel, in his book called The Prophets, says this, and I quote, "The words of the prophet are stern, sour, stinging, but behind his austerity is love and compassion for mankind. Every prediction of disaster is in itself an exhortation of repentance. The prophet is not sent only to upbraid, but also to strengthen the weak hands and make firm the humble knees. Almost every prophet brings consolation and hope of reconciliation, along with censure and castigation. The prophet is a lonely man. He alienates the wicked as well as the pious, the cynics as well as the believers, the priest as well as the princes, the judges and the false prophets. But to be a prophet means to challenge and to defy and to cast out fear." He begins with the message of doom, but he concludes with the message of hope. End of quote. The word prophet in Hebrew is navi, which means a spokesman, a speaker, a preacher, a prophet. and he prophesies, and that word is Lev Sephtaphaim, which means fruit of the lips. Sometimes the fruit is sour, isn't it? But the aftertaste is good. So, the fruit of the lips, by your fruit you'll be known. And the prophet is known by his message. The prophet then is a preacher or a spokesman for Yahweh, a person chosen by Yahweh to communicate to the people on his behalf and convey a message or teaching. The prophet is a role model of holiness, scholarship, and most of all, intimacy with Yahweh. Doesn't mean he's perfect. Just means that he has a relationship with Yahweh. He struggles with that relationship just like you do. But he hears from Yahweh. He said, well, doesn't he speak to all the people? That's what Miriam said, wasn't it? Well, the Lord speaks to us too. And he rebuked Miriam, saying, yes, I speak to you in dreams and visions. But I speak to the prophet face to face. He sets the standard for the entire community and nation. These are the prophets of Israel. The 7 prophets before Egypt are Adam, Noah, Shem, Eber, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, can women be used? Yes. Just like the imahos, or the mothers, the prophetesses, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Well, does he remember us when we were in exile? Yes. He gave us prophets while we were in exile in Egypt. Moses, Aharon, Zimri, Esan, Helman, Holko, Darda. He even called prophets that weren't Israelites, that were Gentiles, to speak. There's Ba'olam or Balaam, Ba'or, Job, Eliphaz, Bildad, Sophar, and Eliyahu ben Barachel. Ladies and gentlemen, there are more prophets than you can imagine in the scriptures. So what is the gift of prophecy? Prophecy is not a gift that is arbitrarily conferred upon a person. Rather, it is the culmination of a person's spiritual and ethical development. When a person reaches a sufficient level of spiritual and ethical achievement, the Shekinah, the divine presence, comes to rest upon him or her. Likewise, the gift of prophecy leaves the person if that person lapses from his or her spiritual and ethical sanctification, as the Shekinah left the temple in Ezekiel 9 and 10. Ba'olam or Balaam, the prophet of the world. He could have been a Moses to the Gentiles. But he failed. The greatest of the prophets in the Tanakh was Moses. It said that Moses saw all that all the other prophets saw combined and more. Balaam was put upon by Balak, which means empty. And King Balak of Media came to Ba'olam, the prophet to the world, and said to him, look here. These people have a power like you do. And you're the only one that I know that has the same kind of power. Curse me, these people. He said, well, let me seek Yahweh. And he prays to Yahweh, and Yahweh says, you can't curse them. And don't go with these men. So he comes back and says, I can't go with you, and I can't curse them. You cannot curse whom Yahweh has blessed, and you cannot bless whom Yahweh has cursed. And they said, well, what if we give you a little gold? Well, let me go seek Yahweh. Now, why if the world, is Yahweh going to change because you give him some gold? No, but Balaam wanted it, didn't he? So he goes back and he seeks Yahweh, and Yahweh says, I told you, don't go with these men. Oh, okay, I can't go with you. What if we give you an honorary degree from the king? Oh, let me go seek Yahweh. Finally, Yahweh relents and says, yeah, I go with them, but you don't say anything that I don't tell you to say. I'll load your lips. And King Balak came to Baalam and took him to a mountain and said, look at these people. Yeah, they're mighty. Look at that. A pillar of fire by night and a pillar of smoke by day. They got the Spirit. Well, curse me, these people. I can't curse whom Yahweh has blessed, and I can't bless whom Yahweh's cursed. Well, let me take you to a better mountain so you can get a better view. Takes him to 2 more mountains, and he's right upon them. Balak says, curse me, these people. They're going to take my whole kingdom. And he opens up his mouth. And he says, oh, ma tovu. How beautiful are your tents, O Israel, and your tabernacle, O Jacob. I see one, not now, but in the future, that's coming. He saw a glimpse of Yeshua. Balak says, oh no! If you're not going to curse him, at least don't bless him. Too late. All he did was acknowledge what Yahweh was already doing. Later on, Balaam loses his position as a prophet when he talks some of the Israelites into laying with the women of Midian. It took Pinhas, or in English Phineas, to take a javelin and run them through the young lady and the young Israelite for compromising the word of Yahweh. Balaam lost out, but Yeshua raised up Pinhas as a priest. Moses, called by Yahweh to lead the children of Israel, never knew that Balaam was trying to, what he was trying to do and Balak was trying to do. Moses saw the big picture, the whole truth of the Torah, including the prophets and the writings that were written hundreds of years later to conclude the New Testament, or the New Covenant. All subsequent prophecy was merely an expression of what Moses had already seen. Yahweh took him on Mount Nebo and showed him everything so he could rest. Thus it is taught that nothing in the prophets or the writings can be in conflict with Moses' writings. Yahweh says, don't add to it and don't take away from it, because Moses saw it all in advance. What was that new covenant that Moses saw? I want you to listen to it. The days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. It will not be like the covenant that I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they broke my covenant, though I was a husband to them. This is the covenant that I will make with the people of Israel after that time. Notice he doesn't say with the people of Israel and the people of Judah anymore, because he's just unified them into the house of Israel. No more 2 kingdoms. Now it's only 1 kingdom. After that time I will put my Torah in their minds, and I will write it upon their hearts. It will become their passion. I will be their Elohim, and they'll be my people. No longer will they teach their neighbor and say to one another, Yada Yahweh. No Yahweh. That's an intimate knowing. The word uses that word Yada. Adam, Yada, Eve, and she conceived. This is an intimacy with Yahweh. No longer will I have to tell you, have a personal relationship with Yahweh, an intimate relationship with Yahweh. For we will all know him. We will all have an intimate relationship with him, from the least of them to the greatest. For I will forgive their wickedness, and I will remember their sin no more. Jeremiah 31 through 34. The new covenant states that the gift of prophecy will not be necessary in the world to come, because in that day all people will have perfect intimacy with Yahweh, meaning that they will be mentally, spiritually, and ethically perfect in him. So how does prophecy relate to the book of Esther? Well, we'll look. When you look at in the book of Esther, and we could roll this scroll out right here in front of you, and it's the same way in every Torah scroll. There are little letters. There are names that are separated. When it lists the 10 sons of Haman that I just read about, it lists them strangely in a separate column than the rest of the text. And in the names, there are certain letters that are small, and there's one letter that is big. The numerical value of the dwarf letters in the listing of Haman's 10 sons are Zadi, Shem, and Tav, and it equals 707, which can represent the year 5707 on the Hebrew calendar, 1946 in the modern Gregorian calendar. According to the sages of Israel, when it lists the names of Haman's sons, it lists them with the word bet. The word bet is used to denote repetition. It would equal our word and this and that and this and that and this and that. Well, but it's unique here because it's separated from its text. So when it is used to denote reputation, we have to conclude that another 10 people would be hung in addition to Haman's 10 sons. The date of the execution of the 10 Nazi generals that perpetuated another final solution upon 6 million Jews qualifies in as Haman's sons, because the spirit of Amalek was on them. The date of their execution was October the 16th, Hoshana Rabbah, in 1946, or the 21st of Tishri, 5707, just like it was prophesied in the book of Esther. The sentence handed down was not the normal sentence of death by firing squad befitting a warrior. The courts at Nuremberg specifically prescribed the execution of a treasonous coward, hanging. Only the 10 descendants of Amalek were hung, thus fulfilling the request of Esther. Let Haman's 10 sons be hanged, even though they were already dead. She said, I want them hung. Why? Because she was looking into the future of another tried a genocide of her people. And prophetically, she's making a statement. Now, when you look at the text, you see the vav is big. There's a reason for this. Remember what Amalek did to you as you were leaving Egypt. He happened upon you and struck the weakest people trailing behind when you were exhausted, and he did not fear Yahweh, says Deuteronomy 25, 17 through 18. So Yahweh said to Moses, write this remembrance in a book, this zikr, in a book, that I will surely erase the memory of Amalek from under the heavens. Yahweh will be at war against the Amalekites from generation to generation, forever. According to Exodus 17:14. Well, that means prophetically that the Amalekites and the spirit of Amalek will be with us forever, whether we remember him or not. Ladies and gentlemen, this antagonism is still with us today. So history teaches us that the spirit of Amalek is not dead, so there will be other sons of Haman. The 10 horns you saw, the 10 kings, who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast, says Revelation 17:12. After that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from the former beast, and it had 10 horns. Daniel 7:7. So those 10 horns are the 10 kings, like the sons of Amalek, the sons of Haman, that will seek to destroy Israel. There was a tomorrow back then, as there's a tomorrow in the future. Another sign in the book of Esther, as it is written in Hebrew, is the sign of the large Vav, the first letter of the last son's name, which represents a very large gallows upon which Haman and his sons were hung, one above the other, rather than 10 separate gallows. So, what's the significance of the Vav? Then said the king, will he also molest the queen in front of me in my own house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face, and Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, a gallows 50 cubits high stands by Haman's house. He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. And the king said, well, then hang him on it. Esther 7:8-9. So that Vav was representing that hanging tree. It's interesting that the rosary is said to represent a noose. In the Catholic Church, the rosary commonly consisted of 5 decades or sets of 10 beads for a total of 50 beads for the recitation of the Hail Mary, the Ave Maria, and the recitation of the Our Father, the Pater Noster, the Lord's Prayer, and the Glory be to the Father, the Gloria Patri, is generally said on each decade, each 10 of those beads during the recitation of prayers. Now, the rosary is not originating with the Catholic Church. Where did it originate? Where do you think it originated? Right back to Babylon. The rosary has the highest antiquity and almost universally found amongst the pagan nations. The rosary prayer beads practice comes from the Indo-Aryan religions, where they used prayer beads to help their prayers. And this was carried into the Asiatic Greece, where the rosary was commonly used, as may be seen from the image of the Ephesian Artemis or Diana, the Babylonian Ishtar. The rabbis of the Talmud had a tradition that the world would last in its present state, in the Olam Hazeh, for 6,000 years, and then Shabbat. The 7th millennium would occur. The tradition further relays the historical breakdown of these 6,000 years. The 6th millennium began with the year 1240. Eliyahu ben Shlomo and the Gaon of Vilna said in his book, Ibn Shalima, that every portion of the Torah related to a different century in the 6th millennium. That meant Parshat Ketavo is the 7th section and should contain allusions to things that would occur between the years 1840 and 1940. At the end of the 1930s, the Nazis had already begun their extermination of the Jews. And he suggested that perhaps the bitter Takacha prayer in Deuteronomy 28:15-68, the warning of punishment for disobedience that appears in Ketavo specifically alluded to the Nazi final solution beginning in 1938. The next 8 sections, the Parsha Netzvayim and Vehelecha, which really is only one section, as is known, we read of the return of the children of Israel to the Promised Land. All of this came to pass following the year 1940 through the establishment of the nation of Israel in 1948. And there is still a return of Israel in our hearts. Now, the letter Vav is the 6th letter in the Hebrew alphabet and is used for the number 6. It's also the letter that is used to indicate man, as man was created on the 6th day. Then Elohim said, let us make man in our image and in our likeness, and so that he may rule over the creatures. Elohim saw all that he had made, and it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. Genesis 1:26 and 31. Listen to what Revelation says. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. And that number is 666. Revelation 13:18. Now, Revelation 13:16 through 18 is perhaps the section of Scripture that has inspired the most conjecture for centuries. Although Rabbi Yochanan's description of the mark of the beast certainly does seem to leave a great deal of interpretation leeway, the proper context in which to approach these verses is from the one Rabbi Yochanan wrote from, a Hebraic Kabbalistic one. It's not about technology. It's about religion. It's not about a chip or a barcode. Notice that when I was a kid, they thought it might be the credit card. And then it moved to the barcode. And then it's moved now to the chip. Well, it's not about technology. It's about religion. The number 66 is, of course, the centerpiece to Revelations 13:17 through 18. This number has been the source of misguided speculation for centuries. Again, any attempt to understand this number apart from the Hebraic context from which Rabbi Yochanan writes will lead to error. As a key is Binah, understanding, which comes from the study of Torah as its deepest levels, we will analyze this mysterious number in the following fashion. The number 6, the three numbers of 6, 666, and the total number of 666. If the number 7 represents a sense of completion, of fullness, as indicated by the similarities of the word Sheva, meaning 7, and Siava, meaning sanctification or fullness, then the number 6 is a lead-in to this process. It is the last step before closure. The final step or activity is often the most important one, for it is the highlight or summary of all the previous steps. 6 is no more or less righteous than 7. In fact, the number 6 is closely associated with both Yahweh and Messiah. It's for this reason that it is closely associated with the negative Messiah, as he comes as a counterfeit. In contrast to the above idea of 6 being a bad number, an argument could even be made that the number 6 is more closely associated with Yahweh than any other number. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666, says Revelation 13:18. In Hebrew gematria, every letter has a corresponding number. Vav is 6. Summing these numbers gives a numerical value to a word or a name. Now, to make a tav, a modern tav today, you use 3 vavs. 3 vavs will make a tav, as you see here. There's the tav, and there's the 3 vavs that make it. The gematria construction of the tav is a vav on the right plus a vav on the top plus a vav on the left. The constructed gematria is then 18. Gematria of 18 equals life, Kayim. So when you look at it, there's the modern tav. But what did the ancient tav look like? Like an X. Except if you're Babylonian. If it's Paleo-Hebrew, it's an X. But if it's Babylonian, it's a cross. So the Hebrew, it's an X. And the Babylonian, it's a cross, which stands for Tammuz. What is Mystery Babylon's most sacred symbol? The sign of the cross. What was the sign of Hitler's Germany? The broken cross. You can look down through the antiquity of time, and there around Nimrod's neck hung the iron cross, the symbol of Tammuz. If any man worships the beast in his image and receives the mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of his wrath, of Yahweh, says Revelations 14, 9 through 10. So are you telling me that the cross is the mark of the beast? Not now. The beast isn't here. But it is the sign of Mystery Babylon. And Mystery Babylon is the religion of the beast. I believe when he comes, he will sanctify that as his, no, it's his emblem. Just as Hitler took the swastika, the ancient Aryan broken cross, as his symbol. Let him that understands understand what the Spirit is saying to the congregation.
Amen.
This book of Esther is a mystic prophetic book written in the form of actual history. You have the key of understanding. It will unravel as a whole. Kayashar, the great Shah of Persia, known to the Jews as Ahasuerus, had all the known world under his dominion and possessed the wealth of all the nations as the ruling genius of the age, holding the imperial titles of Ariamir, the light of the nations, and Shah Hanshah, the Shah of Shahs, or the King of Kings. But there's only one King of Kings. It's King Messiah Yeshua. For on his thigh and on his robe is written the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, says Revelation 19:16.
Amen.
Queen Vashti, who for her disobedience to the king and would not share her beauty with all the peoples, was disposed from her royal seat, representing certain of the scribes and the Pharisees who refused to share the beauty of the Torah as the kingdom of priests should with the world. Every vow or oath that is binding on a wife may be endorsed or annulled by her husband, but if he annuls them longer than a day after he learned of them, then he must bear the burden of his wife's fault, says Numbers 30, 14 through 16. King Messiah Yeshua had to bear the wife's, which was Israel's fault, because more than a day had passed before he dealt with them. He took her sins to the gallows. And that's why he went to the gallows in the first place. He bought Israel's right to return so that we could join him in the new covenant. But now in Messiah Yeshua, you who once were far away have been brought near by the blood of Messiah. Ephesians 2:13. Mordecai the Jew represents the intercession of King Messiah Yeshua. I am not sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, says Matthew 15:24. Mordecai was sent only to those Jews that were living in Persia. Hadassah as Esther, who under the care and tuition of Mordecai is brought up a pure and a virgin, is that spirit of love who is the bride of Messiah, which shall redeem the lost sheep of the house of Israel that must be sifted from the world. Come, I'll show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb, says Revelations 21:9. Before a young woman turned king to go into the Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the woman, 6 months of the oil of myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. It's the same thing with us. We must have the sweet oil of the Holy Spirit applied to our lives, filled from without, so that we can go in to the king's chamber and we'll be beautiful for him.
Amen.
When you look at Vashti, when you look at Esther, it is so the opposite. The bride will not be like Vashti, and shall not speak to put on any of those adornments of man's tradition, or of mere logic, which by trick or priestcraft certain of the scribes and the Pharisees, and even the Herodian Sadducees, used to gain power or favor with the world in that age, which they had been found wanting. The Jews scattered amongst the nations under the dominion of the king represented the lost sheep of the house of Israel that turned back to Yahweh, being grafted into covenant-keeping Judah, making a unified true commonwealth of Israel, the kingdom of Yahweh. Yahweh will scatter you among the people, and only a few of you will survive among the nations to which Yahweh will drive you. Says Deuteronomy 4:27. Haman the Agagite, that spirit of Amalek, that represented the lawless one, the Antichrist, exalted to the highest place in the world's councils, the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience, as Ephesians 2:2. The beast was given a month to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme Yahweh, and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against Yahweh's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the world will worship the beast, and all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world, says Revelations 13:5-8. Haman's wife represents the spirit of Jezebel, which calls herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols, says Revelations 2:20. She had snuck in to the congregation and was preaching these things. Oh, you can eat what you want to. You can live like you want to. We're under grace. But grace is not mercy. Grace is the unmerited power given to every believer so that we can fulfill Yahweh's commandments, not get out of them. Haman's children represents the Sitra Hara, the dark forces of the enemy. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies, says John 8:44. Now notice how Haman seeks to exterminate the remnant of Israel. Haman seeks to attack the Jews, scattered and dispersed amongst the people in all the provinces of your kingdom, says Esther 3:8. Meaning that he would have begun his attack on Jerusalem first. This seems obvious once it's pointed out. By the time Esther takes place, after all Jews have already been released to return to the land and have been rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem and the Holy Temple, this restoration inspires confidence amongst the Jews, to include Mordecai. Haman would undoubtedly have seen Mordecai's faith as arrogant, nationalistic Judaism, and that Jerusalem was the source of that problem, and would have wanted to strike at the head and not merely at the tail. Then on the 13th day of the first month, dispatches were sent by the couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and little children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of this edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that they would be ready for that day. Esther 3:12-14 says. The couriers went out and spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Shushan, but the city of Shushan was bewildered, says Esther 3:15. All the nations will ask, why has Yahweh done this to the land? Why this fierce burning anger? And the answer will be, it's because his people abandoned the covenant of Yahweh, says Deuteronomy 29:24-25. When you abandon the ark of safety, you're opened up to the elements of the enemy. Mordecai compels Esther to go into the king's chambers to intercede for the remnant of Israel. However, Esther says, go gather together all the Jews who are in Shushan and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. When it is done, I'll go to the king, says Esther 4:16. Yahweh said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready by the 3rd day. Because on that day, Yahweh will come. On the morning of the 3rd day, there was a thunder and lightning with a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp was trembled. Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with Elohim, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Notice, Israel had to consecrate themselves before going into the presence of Elohim, King of all kings. Exodus 19, 10, 11, 16, and 17. The Pharisees and the rabbis of the Torah said to Yeshua, Rabbi, we want a sign from you that you're the Messiah. And he answered, a wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but none will be given except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Matthew 12, 38 through 40. Yeshua said, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the rabbis of the Torah. And he must be killed, and on the 3rd day raised to life. Luke 9, 22. For the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinners and be crucified, and on the 3rd day be raised again. Luke 24 and 7. It happened just like the prophecy said. We are witnesses of everything he did in the country of the Jews, Judea, and in Jerusalem. They killed him by hanging him on a gallows. But Yahweh raised him from the dead on the 3rd day and caused him to be seen. He was not seen by all the people, but by witnesses whom Yahweh had already chosen. By us, who ate and drank with him after he rose from the dead. He commanded us to preach to the people and to testify that he is the one whom Yahweh appointed as judge of the living and of the dead. All the prophets, the ones I just listed to you a few minutes ago, all the prophets testify about him, that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name. Acts 10, 39 through 43. And his name is Yeshua. Yahweh is my salvation.
Amen.
Esther exposes Haman's evil plan. However, there is a problem. The laws of Persia and Media cannot be repealed, says Esther 1:19. This is symbolic of the Torah that cannot be abolished. Your word is truth from beginning, and every one of your righteous judgments endures forever. Psalms 119, 160. That's why Yeshua said, I didn't come to destroy the Torah or the prophets. I didn't come to destroy, but to fulfill. Pla'aru, cut it straight, to rightfully interpret it. For surely I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, not one yod, the smallest letter in the Aleph, or a tog, those accent marks to help the cantor above the letters, will by no means pass from the Torah till all is fulfilled. Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men to do so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the rabbis of the Torah and the Parashim, the holiness ones, the separated ones, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Says Matthew 5, 17 through 20. Messiah is the goal of the Torah, for righteousness to everyone that believes. For Moses describes the righteousness which is of the Torah, that the man which does these things shall live by them. Romans 10, 3 through 5. King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther. A sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous, says Proverbs 13:22. And they have impaled him on the pole he set up. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring can be revoked. Esther 8, 7 and 8. Now we know that whatever the Torah says, it says to those who are under penalty of the Torah, so that every mouth will be silenced and the whole world will be accountable to Yahweh. Therefore, no one will be declared righteous in Yahweh's sight by legalistically working the Torah. Rather, through the Torah, we become conscious of sin. So it's Romans 3, 19 through 20. Every Jew understood that the reason Yahweh had allowed Haman to bring this edict upon the house of Judah was because Judah had abandoned their faith. Praise Yahweh. Mordecai and his family stayed true.
Amen.
And he worked through Mordecai to bring deliverance. Behold, the days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I'll make that new covenant. There's the new edict with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. I will put my Torah in their minds and write it upon their hearts. By calling this covenant new, he has antiquated the first one to that which has put on antiquity. By saying, behold, the days are coming, he offers that which is longed for. Hebrews 8:10 through 13. Remember, these Jews were the ones who didn't go back to Judea when Ezra was rebuilding Israel. These Jews felt Persian. It was by the first edict that they saw their need of Yahweh. But there was no way out of judgment until the second edict. The second edict represents the new covenant that brings the law of return to Yahweh. When all these blessings and curses I've set before you come upon you, and you take them to heart wherever Yahweh your Elohim disperses you among the nations, when you and your children return to Yahweh, your Elohim, and obey him with all your heart and with all your soul according to everything I command you today, then Yahweh your Elohim will bring you back from captivity and have compassion on you and gather you again from all the nations where he scattered you, even if you've been banished to the most distant land under the heavens. From there, Yahweh your Elohim will gather you and bring you back. He will bring you to the land that belonged to your ancestors and will take possession of it. He will make you more prosperous and numerous than your ancestors. Yahweh your Elohim will circumcise your hearts and the hearts of your descendants, so that you may love him with all your heart and with all your soul and live. Yahweh your Elohim will put all these curses on your enemies who hate you and persecute you. You will again obey Yahweh and follow his commands that I'm giving you today. Deuteronomy 30:1 through 8. How stupid do you have to be to go against the Jews? Now that you know that the bride of the king is Jewish.
Amen.
Added to that, the new prime minister, Mordecai, is Jewish. So now the Jews are obviously the king's chosen ones. He has now issued the second edict and says the Jews can fight back. Again, it is obvious that the Persian government will side with the Jews because the king is on their side. They do not want a civil war. The Jews have 11 months to prepare for the coming judgment. During this time, they would have got together in groups to better understand the second edict. Still, 75,800 people attacked the Jews. Why? It's because technically it wasn't against the law. The Jews were under judgment, and the first edict said you could do it. Remember, the laws of Persia and Media cannot be repealed. The law can be transformed, but it cannot be abolished. We are no longer under penalty of the law because we were outlaws. Rather, we're in-laws now.
Yes.
More than 75,800 were killed, were Arabs living in the land of Israel who were very angry that the Jews were returning to the promised land. They're trying to sabotage Nehemiah from rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, who sent letters back to Persia to stop the rebuilding of Israel. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. Says Esther 9:5-10. A prophecy. The word of Yahweh concerning Israel. Yahweh, who stretches out the heavens, who lays the foundation of the earth, and who forms the human spirit with a person, declares, I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding people reeling. Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem. On that day, when all the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all nations. All who try to move it will injure themselves. On that day, I'll strike every horse with panic and its rider with madness, declares Yahweh. I'll keep a watchful eye over Judah, but I will blind all the horses of the nations. Then the clans of Judah will say in their hearts, the people of Jerusalem are strong because Yahweh Almighty is their Elohim. On that day, I will make the clans of Judah like a fire pot in a wood pile, like a flaming torch among the sheaves. And they will consume all the surrounding peoples right and left. But Jerusalem will remain intact in her place. Yahweh will save the dwellings of Judah first, so that the honor of the house of David and of Jerusalem's inhabitants may not be greater than that of Judah. On that day, Yahweh will shield those who live in Jerusalem, so that the feeblest among them will be like David, and the house of David will be like Elohim, like the angel of Yahweh going forth before them. On that day, I will set out to destroy all the nations that attack Jerusalem. And I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They will look on me, the one they pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and grieve bitterly for him as one grieves for a firstborn son. On that day, the weeping in Jerusalem will be as great as the weeping of Hadad Ramon on the plains of Megiddo. The land will mourn, each clan by itself, with their wives by themselves. The clans of the house of David and their wives, the clans of the house of Nathan and their wives, the clan of the house of Levi and their wives, the clans of Shimei, Mordecai's clan, and their wives, and all the rest of the clans and their wives. So Zechariah 12. Can you see it when the Messiah comes? Here is Israel, by their tribes and clans, mourning for the one that was pierced on their behalf. That'll include you and me. We're not cocky that can say, oh, yeah, well, I didn't do it. Yeah, you did. Every sin you've committed, nail those nails into his hands and feet. Mordecai recorded all these events and sent letters to the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually the 14th and the 15th day of the month of Adar as the right time when the Jews got relief from their enemies. On that day, they received relief from their enemies, says Esther 9, 20 through 22. Why did Mordecai send out letters? He sent out letters because in some of the provinces, no Jew had been attacked. And he still wanted them to know what their brothers had gone through. He wanted to send a report of Yahweh. He also wanted to send the command that these days of Purim should never fail to be celebrated amongst the Jews, nor should the memory of these days die out among the rest of the clans of Israel, their descendants. Esther 9 and 28. So Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter concerning Purim, says Esther 9:29. In Esther's letter, she confirms that Purim should be celebrated. And then she adds that the day before Purim should be a time of fasting and lamentations. Esther 9 and 30. Ladies and gentlemen, these days are coming when we will go through some things again. But in that day, Yahweh will deliver us.
Amen.
We're on the winning side. The book of Esther speaks to us historically, allegorically, and prophetically. That's my message.
Amen.
Brother Robert, I'll have to print out that for you. I didn't print it out yet. But thank you. Isn't Yahweh good? All of his word speaks to us, doesn't it? Even if it just seems like a story, it speaks to us so deeply. The humble will eat and be satisfied. Those who seek Yahweh will praise him. May your hearts live forever. Don't forget that tomorrow is Rosh Hashanah Aviv. So be here. We're going to celebrate the new year. Also, the following week is the cleansing of the sanctuary. We've got to get it ready for Passover. And then after that comes Passover. And we'll all celebrate it together here. Those that are circumcised in flesh and in heart are welcome as members of this congregation. It is a close meal, but it opened up to the members here. And so come and expect a wonderful time in Yahweh. Baruch atah Yahweh, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei minei mazano. Baruch atah Yahweh, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'adama. Baruch atah Yahweh, Eloheinu melech haolam, sher hakol niyeh bevaro. Which means, Blessed are you, Yahweh, our Elohim, King of the universe, who creates various kinds of sustenance, creator of the fruit of the vine, by whose word all things came to be. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Yahweh, my strength and my redeemer. When you have eaten and are satisfied, you shall bless Yahweh, your Elohim, for the good of the land that he's given us. And we can all say, Amen. Let's eat! I know I missed it, but
No, we got all
We got it all in here.
oh, good, okay.
and the CD too.
Oh, cool.
We're good.
Okay, so now this is the real time. Normally it's a little bit behind, but not a whole lot. Okay, you see this is the real time, right? You see her walking, but not yet here. Okay, that's why we want to hit pause until everything is truly over on internet. Because this machine here is transferring the sound into internet. You know what I mean? And immediately we're not having video stop, which is not good. But then we were really close to the end, so we didn't cause a big harm. But just so you know, this is really behind, like 5 minutes. The people will miss that last 5 minutes of the teaching. So don't do what he did. Yeah, but now, you see, this is the internet. You know it's truly, truly over, because we're not really that behind. Remember he came here and pat you, right? Yeah, so that was, see, nobody's here. Now, you can stop.